UofL. And like I said, we do have quite a few important presentations today from 3 different presenters. And Dr. Klein is also here to get us updated with some leadership updates. And then I have a few things at the end. If we have time, we can talk about them. We will be putting links into the chat for several of those topics. So if for some chance we don't, have time to go over those, you can look at the chat. But then if you have questions about them, you can always reach out to me or Cecilia Pareto, who's on here. All right, John, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give you a few brief updates regarding federal funding, and then also the sponsored programs office changes here that I think hopefully will be very welcome. So let's start first with the federal funding update. The news continues to be that our grants that are funded, we're able to draw funds out of them, and that we're realizing at the indirect cost rate negotiated last summer of 57%. And so from that perspective, things are continuing to go well. Sponsored programs checks that very aggressively to make sure no changes have occurred. As far as we know, and this really relies on the PIs to let us know, no federal grants have received stop work orders in the last 3 weeks. No NIH grants have been discontinued. No NSF grants have been discontinued. There were grants in, I believe, in the College of Education that were pass-throughs through an NGO, and those did receive stop work orders that were several weeks ago. At the NIH, study sections are being scheduled again. The block on the Federal Register was removed several days ago. I had a study section 2 weeks ago that went off without postponement or cancellation. And the advisory councils that provide the final approval for funding are being scheduled again and are slowly coming back online. I've had a number of questions from people about, well, what about funded grants, the non-competitive renewals? And so far, those are all being processed, and the money continues to flow. Moving on to sponsored programs, the service account, the email service account for sponsored programs, which is so essential. We recognized some time ago that there was a backlog and that was not being handled aggressively enough. The backlog is completely cleared up. It's checked several times daily, and the response time is now 24 hours or less. So big thank you to Bryn Bidwell and the other folks in sponsored programs who are making that into a real service organization, one piece at a time. And then finally, I wanted to mention in the chat, Lee is going to put a link for an organization that follows NIH funding and supports it. And it shows the economic impact of NIH funding in all 50 states, including in Kentucky. And the return on the investment is an important one. It's a little over threefold. Every dollar turns into $3 in economic impact. And I think it's something we all should be proud of and we should share widely. And that's really what I've got in my updates. I think we're ready to start this very full program. First, I think the first speaker is Patrick Pussell from the College of Education and Human Development, and to speak about behavioral science, a hub interdisciplinary research, the example of overthinking. That is something that I suspect we are all prone to in the last 4 to 8 weeks. Patrick, take it away.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me here at the town hall. Actually, the last town hall impacted heavily what I'm talking about today. Oops. Yeah, come on. So last town hall, we learned from Dr. Klein that behavioral science will be, how did you say, be a pillar and an emerging science in our new strategic plan. So I thought instead of talking about one area of research, maybe I should talk a little bit about what behavioral science is and how I think it could be a pillar like this, could be maybe not an silo, but maybe what I try to say in the title, a hub for interdisciplinary research. So for the few of you that might or might not have a clear idea at the moment what behavioral science actually is, it's a very broad thing. When you Google it, it basically is the study of human behavior in social and individual contexts. Obviously, we are all human beings, which means that we organize our world around humans, and we organize our sciences around humans. So I think it appears quite obvious to me that everything around human behavior can easily be interdisciplinary. What I hope to do today is stimulate all of you to think a little bit about how your field and how your particular research might actually tap into behavioral science and the other way around. And I don't want to talk today about one particularly outcome variable that we might study in behavioral science, but basically the constructs that we use. In this example, I use something, it's exactly what Dr. Klein said, that might be relevant for all of us. And not only in the last couple of weeks, it might simply be more stimulated. So when you find yourself constantly thinking about situations, problems, or feelings, that might be a sign of you overthinking. When you find yourself noticing that's hard to slow down your mind. When you find yourself experiencing intense negative emotions for longer periods of time. Usually we don't talk about overthinking if we go and say, I can't forget how much I love my firstborn child. Usually we use the term overthinking when it comes to emotions that we don't want, so negative emotions. When you find yourself avoiding or not finishing tasks, when you find yourself not falling or staying asleep when you want to, because basically your mind is racing. When you find yourself noticing physiological activation that does not fit the situation, like elevated blood pressure or heartbeat, or you sweat despite the fact that you're not doing anything. So if any of you thinks at the moment, no, that's not me, I don't do this, you're really clearly the exception. I think that most of us do this. It's more a question, how much do we do this? Okay, so let's switch a little bit from this layperson term overthinking to scientific names and a little bit an explanation what I mean with overthinking. So there's number one, this overarching label of repetitive negative thinking. You see two things in this label. Number one, repetitive. That means it's not only that we start doing this once in a lifetime or in very difficult situations like right now, but we do this actually more like a habit. And if it is more pronounced right now, then it is because there are more activating events. Number one. Number two, you see negative, and I said this earlier already, usually we are not thinking a lot about it if it's about positive things we are thinking a lot about. Okay. Then this repetitive negative thinking can be split into two subconstructs. If we think about something that happened in the past, then we call it rumination. If it is something that we anticipated might happen in the future, then we call it worry. Rumination itself can be split in sadness rumination and anger rumination. And let me use sadness rumination as an example, actually, how rumination works. What happens is that the situation that makes us sad basically pops up in our head all the time or repeatedly, and which keeps the emotion up. But it's not only that extends the unwanted, so the negative emotion, but it also intensifies it. So sadness rumination comes actually from research to depression. Anger rumination, I think the term is obvious. And now you might wonder, what is worry about? So when you think about, when you worry about the future, what emotion comes up? Anxiety, exactly. So you see that repetitive negative thinking, the different subtypes, are clearly related to specific negative emotions and mental health or behavioral health problems. Sadness rumination got about 20 years ago also split in two more subconstructs. One is brooding or pondering, and the other one is reflection. Brooding is basically something like, it always happens to me, I will never get out of it. It's basically we are sitting in this negative feeling without having the idea to get anywhere. While reflection is more reflecting on the situation. It's not yet problem solving, but it's reflecting on it. So it's a little bit more cortical, if you want to. Here's an interesting thing that you might be interested in. Brooding is consistently, or both of them are cross-sectionally associated with depression, right? But brooding, different from reflection, is actually a good predictor of depression. So reflection happens when we are already sad, when we are already depressed, but it doesn't predict future depression, while brooding does. So now the question, why do you care? Why is it all interdisciplinary? So I talked already about the connection between repetitive negative thinking and emotions like anger and aggression, depression and anxiety. And I marked them in blue, not because I talked about them, because that's outcome variables that my lab examines. Then I have this particular anxiety that you can see here, PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. We have eating disorder, substance use, suicidality, and a whole range of other ones. I also had, 2 slides back, a couple of things that are associated with physiological arousal, right? So we have elevated blood pressure, cortisol. If you don't know this, it's a stress hormone that goes up. I talked earlier about sleep problems. It is also that repetitive negative thinking is associated with chronic disease. So we do, for example, currently, and that's the reason why it's lighter blue, a study where we look into repetitive negative thinking and cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. And you see here where I move away from behavioral health and psychology to other professions. So we have epidemiology here, we have biology, medicine, and nursing here. Another field that I can see easily connected to this behavioral science construct of repetitive negative thinking is public health. So my team, so let me take a step back for a second. Many, if not all, of the behavioral science models nowadays are what we call vulnerability stress models. Vulnerability is basically something that is within us, and the stressor is literally what you might anticipate. A stressful situation, a stimulus that comes from the outside. For example, what Dr. Klein talked about at the moment, the uncertain environment around universities. So, and they need to come together to lead to outcome variables, okay? And 2 constructs or 2 stressors that my team examined are basically perceived everyday discrimination and subjective social status. They're basically the individual level and the subjective experience of systemic stressors. This is basically where I see personally public health coming in with the social determinants of health. And I also want to use this as maybe an example how you can conceptualize the interdisciplinary nature of repetitive thinking that I see. You have public health here with hopefully in the future actually the upstream, so levels of systemic of social determinants of health, and then you have basically the psychological and physiological outcome variables. Could be an easy interdisciplinary project. Oops. So what else do we have? We had already anger and aggression, and we have substance use, where you could see law and law enforcement interested in. Something that I actually learned preparing for this presentation is that there's some, not a lot, but some research actually to gang involvement and repetitive negative thinking. And to make sure, because I'm not an expert there, I reached out to the researcher doing this research in the United Kingdom, and she confirmed that all the research to repetitive negative thinking and gang involvement is actually cross-sectional. So basically, people went into prisons, looked into repetitive negative thinking, and compared basically incarcerated men. Depending, basically split them in groups. Are they involved in gangs or not? And learned, yes, people in gangs have more repetitive negative thinking, but because it's cross-sectional, we don't know, is repetitive negative thinking vulnerability that you might get involved in gangs, or is it the other way around, that if you're involved in a gang, you might be you might have more reasons to think negatively because of the higher risk. I think that could be a really cool thing to examine. What else do we have? You might know that in my college we have HSS, so Health and Sports Sciences. So of course I have to talk about this a little bit. So a particular form of anxiety that repetitive negative thinking is also associated with is competition anxiety. So the anxiety that athletes have before and while they compete, and the actual sports performance is impacted. And last but not least, as an example that I picked here, is business, economics, and HR. So we did, for example, in a study, we looked into employment uncertainty, which then interacted with repetitive negative thinking and impact, which the interaction then influenced behavioral health outcomes. But there are also studies to burnout, emotional exhaustion, innovative performance, and actual turnover. People that think more repetitively and negatively turn more over and leave companies. So you see, I just use as an example overthinking because that's my research area, so I can talk a little bit about it. But when the new strategic plan comes out, or maybe before that, I would like to encourage you all to think a little bit how actually the study of human behavior in individual and or social settings influences or is connected to what you do in your research. I don't suggest do anything else, but maybe including a construct like overthinking and actually broaden your research and might open up the opportunity for interdisciplinary research. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Are you kidding?
Thank you, Patrick. That was really interesting. I am as much a victim as a scholar of overthinking, as are most of us. It's a fascinating area, and thanks for bringing it to the front for us all to hear about. Lee, I'm going to take a minute for a commercial break here, literally a minute. I want everyone to be very certain that you have filled out and completed your online profile. That is very, very necessary, not only for the web pages, but also for analytics. It is how we're trying to do some analytics to promote strategic investments in research. So please complete your profile online. It took me about 15 minutes to do it. 25 if you don't have an ORCID ORCID number, but many of us do. So it's really painless. So please, it really helps, and it will also guide us in spending the money that we have to invest in strategic investments. So please, I'm going to mention this every town hall and every research dean's meeting until we get to about 80%. Our next speaker is Dr. Bibhuti Sar from the Kent School of Social Work, who is speaking about empowering community practice through research partnerships. Is Dr. Saar here?
Yes. Trying to having a little
There you
trouble
are.
uploading my slides.
If you need me to share them, I can do that for you.
Yes, if you don't mind. Well, first of all, thanks everybody for being here and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon. Um, I'm Vibhuti Sar, a faculty member and a longtime uh, researcher, teacher at the Kent School of Social Work. And I'd like to talk to you today about really placing our research interests within the community setting and through a specific example. So we can go to the next slide. Just briefly, my research interests, I've dabbled in many areas, but most of it has been in community-based research. And over the years, I've been able to be fortunate enough to receive funding to be able to really implement different kinds of research projects within the community with primarily within social work organizations and agencies. And as you can see here, they range anywhere from child welfare to mental health. And today I'm just going to primarily talk to you a little bit about my work with refugees. Next. I think it's really important that we have some grounding and some theoretical base by which we engage with the community. And as a social worker, one of my primary goals is to not only conduct the research, but have some mechanism by which we are actually influencing change, and particularly in practice. So most of my work has really been around embracing the spectrum of prevention framework, which I find is to be very consistent with values that I hold, as well as I believe our discipline holds. And in terms of writing grants and proposing research, always keeping in mind that we should not only be thinking in terms of direct impact on consumers to improve their livelihood and quality of life, but at the same time, we also need to be influencing those folks who actually provide the service, folks who are making policies and programs. And so at each phase of the spectrum of prevention framework, there's an opportunity for us to impact at that level. And primarily because we're a research and education institution, our tools are really tools of research and tools of teaching and training. And I hope to show through this example how we've been able to do that. Next slide, please. As stated in the prevention framework, there are 7 core prevention strategies. And as you can see here, they range from strengthening individual knowledge and skills to influencing policy and legislation. You can also see that every aspect of designing a project, implementing a project, carrying out research, requires us to be thinking in terms from a prevention strategy perspective, how what we're going to do in the project relates back to the real world in a sense. And primarily, every component of changing practice requires us to be able to use the research evidence that we garner through our studies. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm going to primarily focus on the work that we've been doing with refugees since 2012, where we received funding from the Office of Refugee Resettlement to primarily address the needs of refugees who have had experienced torture while in their homeland, during transit, and sometimes even at post-resettlement. I understand that this is not a topic that's all that popular right now, and may not be something that people are willingly wanting to talk about. But the reality is that there are over 122 million who are displaced around the world, and of those, 44 million folks are refugees. Next slide. One of the most interesting things I've learned through this work is that Kentucky consistently has been in the top state for receiving refugees. And over a 10-year period, when we look at the data, they are consistently at number 4 or number 5. And that may be surprising because I think most folks think that refugees land in either in the East Coast or West Coast, not so much in the middle of the country. But as you can see here, really the range of refugee distributions and resettlement is really throughout the country, and actually more of the middle of the country is more areas that we wouldn't expect to have refugee resettle, or in fact is what's happening. Next. I was able to find some data to show that at least for the last year, depending on the political winds, as you all know, the number of refugees resettled in this country, waxes and wanes. But in the last year in Kentucky, we had just over 15,000 folks resettled. The major areas in the state, as you can see, would be sort of metropolitan or suburban. What's interesting here is that the more of the rural areas of the state are now having more and more refugees resettled, and growing areas are really Owensboro, Covington, in that area. There's obviously the major areas are Lexington, Louisville, and Bowling Green. Bowling Green is probably has got the most growth in the last couple of years, and primarily because Kentucky tends to be a secondary state, meaning that folks who were resettled initially probably started out in some other part of the country, and then they moved to Kentucky because they had relatives or family or kin had resettled previously. So interestingly, yearly, we may not see first-timers in Kentucky, but second and third-timers, what I would like to call them, in terms of resettling in separate secondary places, you're more likely to run into those folks. So there's and it's also, Kentucky is one of those places where refugees also tend to leave more frequently, particularly either to the East Coast or West Coast when they have other family members. As you can see here, last year we actually ranked number 14. Next. A particular sort of hidden aspect of the refugee experience is torture. It's not something that's always talked about, but surprisingly, or not so surprisingly, that torture is practiced around the world, overtly, covertly, but it's unfortunately a reality for many folks. Next. The actual percentages and prevalences for refugees is really not known because, as I said, it's really a hidden issue. And what we found is that it takes sometimes some years before people actually acknowledge and reveal that they were tortured due to the fact that there is much shame, guilt, a sense of responsibility that comes with folks who feel that they could have done something differently to avoid the torture. And since we have started services in Louisville back in 2012, and then in Lexington and Bowling Green subsequently, we found that probably about 17% of the folks that are initially screened for torture in Kentucky. There's about 17%, and that's sort of in the mid-range, considering the estimates could be anywhere from 5 to 35%. Okay. Next. There is really no one reason for why refugees are tortured, but you can probably guess what they typically are. Folks are persecuted primarily because of their political or religious beliefs, and often because of what they do, and certainly, increasingly, one's sexual orientation and practices are subject to torture in many areas. Next. So in the U.S., we have a specific definition of torture, and it centers around the notion of color of law. That is essentially because of one's beliefs and practices, the state sanctions their torture, and that's really different than family violence, for example, or other kinds of war crimes and such that may happen to a refugee. But more specifically, the folks that we serve in Kentucky and in the other 37 torture recovery centers throughout the country have most likely been tortured because of some sort of, from the state's perspective, they violated some political or religious decrees that the state does not believe in. Next. Important distinction is that there's two types of survivor torture. The primary, that is where an individual has been directly been victimized. The other is a secondary survivor has made to watch or witness the violence being inflicted, and it's a tactic of control that's used. And often family members are made to stand and watch their other family member being tortured. So in terms of screening, we screen for both, and both are, it's hard to say whether one type of primary is, in terms of their trauma, is any different than a secondary. They're equally horrendous and important to address. Next. There are many forms of torture, as you can see here. The most common ones are in terms of physical, in terms of severe beatings and such. And so many refugees that we see in Kentucky have had experienced not only physical damage to their organs and such, but many of them have had TBIs and such. And then the psychological, probably the most common, is in terms of social isolation, threats, sleep deprivation, and witnessing of others being tortured. Next. And this is just a few visual examples here. The ones that we see most often in terms of pain, most refugees who have been tortured, a common complaint is in terms of both physical and psychological pain. And as you can see, it's primarily due to the kinds of torture that they experienced. Next. So torture really affects you physically through, not only your biological, physical system, but neuromuscular symptoms. It has far-reaching effects that are really long-term. For many symptoms don't show up until way after the torture has occurred. Next. The primary psychological effects are really PTSD symptoms. And along with that, depression and anxiety would be the most common symptomology that are reported. Next. And as you can imagine, a refugee who has been tortured, this is a lifelong trauma they have to live with. And so in terms of services and treatment, it's similar to basically having a chronic condition that must be addressed throughout one's life. Next. A survivor torture really, as I said, lives with the torture experience throughout their lives, and it is a constant presence in terms of their daily functioning. And that is so important and critical to remember, because when refugees arrive, they now essentially have 3 months to get resettled, find employment, housing. They do have some support, although that's always dwindling. But if you are thinking about having a chronic condition, to what extent are you up and about to be able to master these specific areas of housing, employment, and in the best of circumstances, it takes some time. So there's this additional acculturation stressors of resettlement that goes along with being a torture survivor. Next. Now that I've just sort of given you a brief overview of refugees and their torture experience, as I said before, through funding through Office of Refugees Resettlement, we were been able to partner with family health centers at Americana in Louisville, which is a qualified health provider, Kentucky Refugee Ministries in Lexington, and which is a refugee resettlement organization, and KY Steps is a standalone mental health facility. To be able to provide, to first of all screen every refugee that comes to Kentucky for torture, and then subsequently make the appropriate treatment plan for them in terms of services. We have, I believe, screened over nearly 10,000 refugees, and as I said earlier, about 17% of those folks have indicated either being a primary or secondary survivor of torture. Next. There are a variety of treatment modalities for serving torture survivors, but our particular program centers on these 6 areas. And the primary focus is to rebuilding trust, reestablishing safety, and reconstructing a positive view of self, which may, depending on where the refugee is in terms of their torture experience, it may be short-term, but it may take some time. Typically, a refugee will be in services anywhere from 1.5 to 2 years, just to get to the point where they are able to manage the torture experience on their own. Next. So as part of our, not only to be able to provide services, but also to evaluate and learn what is it that we're doing that's working. And so our research program, in terms of trying to inform practitioners, centers on these 6 specific areas, as I mentioned, are safety, stability, self-efficacy, connectedness, productivity, and well-being. It's really critical that we look at these elements not only from a concrete accomplishment stage, but also from a more psychological sense of where folks are. And just to give you a brief example, I'm just going to go over a study that we did specifically around safety. Next. Our main question was, how do survivors of torture attempt to reconstruct a sense of their safety in their country of resettlement? This was a qualitative study using constructive grounded theory. We interviewed 10 women, 4 men. All were receiving services for at least 6 months, and at the time of our interviews, none were experiencing acute mental health service issues. And what we found, go to the next slide, please. The sense of safety is not a monolithic kind of thing. In fact, what we found with in our study was that a sense of safety was gained by folks by seeking out a safer physical environment. And so in some ways, moving to Louisville or Lexington or Bowling Green and being relocated and resettled was the initial step in feeling safer, given their past circumstances. The other critical was where treatment was very valuable is making connections with the service provider where they felt safe. The other was in terms of learning different coping mechanisms, and really rethinking, reevaluating, reauthoring their past experience, their torture experience, as a way of a new way of coping. The most interesting finding was this sense of turning inward through social isolation. That is, at times people felt safer if they just sort of isolated themselves, which on the surface is sort of problematic, perhaps, because we think of isolation as something that leads to depression, alienation, and so forth and so on. But in this instance, it was a clear coping mechanism.
Dr. Sarr, can I interrupt? We're running out of time for our other presenter, so I'm hoping that you can quickly sort of wrap this up, and then if people have additional questions, they could reach out to you separately.
Sorry, I apologize. Really, just have 2 quick slides. My main point is that, to give you an example, that refugees' experiences are more complex than what we currently are seeing in the political realm, and that refugees are more than the symptomology in which or problems that they're thought to be have been creating. Go to the next slide, please. And I think it's important to realize that, as this quote states, that we really need to look at the root causes of how refugees come to be, rather than looking at refugees as a source of problem and issue. So through this process of engage in research and practice, we hope not only to influence what we do directly with clients, but also to change the minds at the larger political policy level. Thank you, and I apologize for taking so much time.
No, that's fine. It's very fascinating work and timely. I have one quick comment about it to the group, and we can certainly bring this up next time if others are also interested. Work like this, I'm interested in what UofL is doing to promote knowledge like this out to the public, given the public's current attitude about research and some of the changes that are going on. Like, is there a communication plan, and can we share some of this type of knowledge out into our communities to help others, see the benefit of research and to also clarify some of the misunderstandings? John, you're shaking your head. Do you mean to talk?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
It's a tremor.
To tremor. Okay. All right, let's go to the next presenter. John, I think you're up to introduce.
Okay. Sure. And we're going to go over here because I really want to hear this entire presentation. Please I'm encouraging everyone to stay and hear it. So this presentation is entitled Cancer Costs and Coping, How Financial Toxicity Influences Financial Quality of Life in Older Adults. That's a demographic I'm particularly interested in. And the presenter is Professor Carlin Brentzenhoff-Jock, who is from the School of Social Work and Family Science and the Oncology Social Work program. Take it away.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to do this. And I'm excited to share this research. So I've been here, this is my 4th year at University of Louisville, and I'm the endowed chair of oncology social work at the Kent School. Let me make this happen. There we go. Okay, just one quick piece about me is I use this framework, which the social work usually uses the biopsychosocial framework. I've extended it over the 30 years I've been practicing and teaching and mentoring in social work to be the biopsychosocial, spiritual, sexual, cultural. Can you see the slide? Yes, okay. Factors of individuals, and I call these the BPSSCs. And this actually matches with a bit of what Patrick was talking about and also Vibhuti. This is my the committee that CARG Advocacy Committee is doing this research, and these are my colleagues from around the country who are working on this with me. So the background, financial toxicity, I at least hear it all the time these days, but it was introduced, the term was actually introduced in 2013 by Zafar and others. There's been a lot of research, there's been a lot of research that has shown that financial toxicity has a inverse relationship with quality of life and health-related quality of life among those with cancer. Part of the reason we did this study is that there's little research on financial toxicity among older adults. It's a unique population with unique BPSSCs that they bring to the cancer experience. So there are two studies. One was published in 2008 by Head and Fowl, both whom are on faculty here at the University of Louisville. And then in 2015, someone who had completed their dissertation on financial quality of life, she and I published in 2015. And both of these studies, the Head and Fowl study, reported the testing, the validity, reliability, and validity of an instrument that Barbara Head had developed. And then Callahan and I used that same measure. So I'm going to do a few definitions. The first is, what is financial toxicity? And this is the burden that people experience when they're paying for cancer care, and the impact it has on their financial security and their families. There are a lot of financial toxicity is called a lot of different names. So it's financial distress, financial stress, financial burden, economic burden. The financial hardship is the term that the NCI is pushing for us to use for this construct. So quality of life. Most research into quality of life, especially in the cancer world, includes 4 domains: the physical, social, emotional, and functional. And what Dr. Hall did was to add this piece of financial as a 5th domain of quality of life. And so financial quality of life is the ability to manage all current and future obligations related to cancer care within the context of sound healthcare decision-making. And this healthcare decision-making occurs when it's the doctors making the decisions, as well as across the continuum of shared decision-making. So the purpose of this study was to explore financial toxicity in older adults with cancer and to contribute to the quality of life literature by examining the relationship between financial toxicity and financial quality of life. Our aim was to investigate financial toxicity, financial quality of life, and actions taken by older adults with cancer to manage the reaction to the financial toxicity. It was a cross-sectional mixed methods. We recruited people from ResearchMap, from CARG, that I mentioned earlier, and then from other cancer support organizations who agreed to publish the invitation via their social media platforms. Our sample goal is 350, and we are not really close to it at all with a total sample of 59. We thought that we would get a lot more responses from Research Match, but that didn't happen. So these findings are preliminary, and they are only from these 59 participants. So it is just a introduction to how we can examine financial quality of life and the financial toxicity among this group. So we use the cost facet. The socioeconomic well-being scale was developed by Barbara Head for her dissertation research, and then, like I said, published in 2008. We also included 3 items asking participants about how well their health insurance covered different expenses. We included 19 strategies that in the literature people with cancer have used to reduce the cost of cancer diagnosis and treatment, and also demographics and illness-related characteristics. So here are the demographic characteristics. So unfortunately, but not surprising, they were mostly white married females who completed the survey in suburbia, and 90% had Medicare, which is a little lower than the national data, which says 98% of those over the age of 65 have Medicare. Most were prostate and breast disease. Breast cancer had lots of treatments, and 27% of them were currently in treatment. And one of the reasons we included newly diagnosed or just starting treatment, as well as those who have been survivors, is that we wanted to examine where in the continuum does financial toxicity start showing up. I was talking to one of the patient advocates in CARG, and they were looking at our study, and she said, you really need to remember to look at people who've been out a long time survivors, because the cost of cancer care doesn't happen during the first treatment. It happens over time and continues to happen with late effects and long-term effects. So these are the summary statistics. These are the main variables I'm presenting today. So financial toxicity in one of the studies on reliability and validity of the cost, they said those below a score of 23 could have mild, moderate, or severe financial toxicity. And so this with a mean of 27, it was pulled up from the 23 by higher scores. Financial quality of life, this ranges from, scores range from 17 to 85. So we had higher levels on the higher end of financial quality of life. They used on average 2.5 strategies. And a majority of them said that their insurance covered treatment prescriptions and pain prescriptions very well or well. So these are the statistical findings based on the 59 participants. So we did find that financial toxicity is strongly related to financial quality of life. Inversely related, number of strategies is inversely related to both financial toxicity and financial quality of life. So the lower of those scores, the more likely they're going to use more strategies. Time since diagnosis didn't show up as significant at all. And then the correlations between the insurance of treatment, prescriptions, and pain meds, the majority were related to positively related to financial quality of life, financial toxicity, and strategies. So this is what I really want to talk about. So these are the strategies that the participants used in managing their financial toxicity and financial quality of life. And the highlighted ones are all about prescriptions. This is the most commonly used strategy, is to lower the cost of prescriptions. But we also have people going into debt. We have people filing bankruptcy, which is medical debt is the main reason people apply for bankruptcy. A few of them had to go without basics like food and clothing, which is something we really need to continue to look at. And they cancel or spread out their appointments with their doctors or the treatment adherence. So these are all variables, strategies that can be used or help patients, in this case, over the age of 65, when they do have experience financial toxicity, which we know leads to, could lead to poor financial quality of life, is that we can help them in identifying these strategies of, focusing first on the prescriptions, I think, and then focusing on the other strategies that are here to help them strengthen their knowledge about what strategies they could use, as well as help them feel more in control of what is actually happening in their experience of being diagnosed and treated with cancer. Here are my references, and I am not sure if we have any time, but thank you very much for listening. And anyone, you're welcome to email me if you want to talk more.
Thank you, Carlin. That was very insightful, and at the same time, you did it very well timed. You stuck to let's get this finished. I appreciate that. We are a little over, as John said, so I'll let John do some closing remarks and bring to your attention that we did add, Cecilia and I, several links and some information into the chat. And like I mentioned at the beginning, if you have questions regarding any of that, feel free to reach out to one of us and we will get back to you.
I just want to thank everyone who presented today. And, sometimes what we do in our scholarship is embraced by society. Sometimes society's indifferent to it, and sometimes it's openly hostile. It doesn't change the value within the academy of what we do, and ultimately the value to society, in my opinion. So I want to thank all three speakers for continuing to labor. Galileo once said in Italian, "Eppur si muove," which allegedly he said, and yet it still moves. He knew that his work was important, even though he was brought in front of a court of the Inquisition. Academics doesn't change a lot over the centuries. These things happen. So I encourage everyone to continue to push ahead with their scholarship. And at some point in time, it'll be, absolutely understood the importance of everything that we're doing. And I think that that's all I have to say. Is there anything else from you, Lee? You're mute.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, I think we covered everything on the agenda, and like you, I'm very thankful for the presenters' time and excellent presentations. If you have questions for any of them, I highly encourage you to reach out to them individually. I'm sure they'll be happy to share more about their research and, discuss ways that maybe you can tap into their work and collaborate. Thank you, everyone.
See you next month.
Thank you.